welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are diving headfirst into what is honestly the greatest microscopic detective story of all time. Our mission? To figure out exactly how Earth went from being a completely sterile, lifeless rock floating in space to a vibrant, living planet. I mean, think about it. Long before there were any trees or dinosaurs or even a single breath of oxygen in the atmosphere, the Earth was just this barren stone. So how did we get from pure dead chemistry to actual breathing biology? Well, to find out, we're going to have to explore the ancient, pitch-black depths of our oceans. Right, so this is the fundamental question, isn't it? It's the core mystery that's fascinated humanity for centuries. For the longest time, the origin of life seemed, almost like magic, or maybe just a totally improbable accident. But we're essentially standing at the scene of an ancient, sterile world, investigating the ultimate locked room mystery. How on earth did mindless molecules somehow cooperate to build the very first living organism? Well, modern research is revealing a story that is incredibly different and honestly vastly more logical than just a random roll of the cosmic dice. Chapter 1. The Ultimate Cold Case. To establish the facts of this crime scene, we really have to travel back over 4 billion years. As this quote by John Desmond Bernal beautifully points out, we have to kind of strip away everything we recognize about our vibrant green planet and imagine an impossible toxic world before we can understand the hard science of how life actually survived it. We're talking about the Hadean Eon, literally named after Hades, the Greek underworld. The atmosphere was this suffocating mix of carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia. The oceans were slightly acidic, and the skies were just choked with volcanic ash and constantly bombarded by meteorites. Basically, it was a wildly hostile, punishing place. But what's really mind-blowing here is how incredibly fast the first biological clues appeared during this violent time. Earth forms about 4.5 billion years ago, the oceans condense roughly 140 million years later, and yet, we actually see possible evidence of microfossils as early as 4.28 billion years ago. The spark of life didn't wait around for billions of years for conditions to get perfectly comfortable. It happened rapidly, almost as soon as there was liquid water. Moving on to Chapter 2, Profiling the Ancestor. To solve a cold case this old, we need to trace billions of years of genetic fingerprints backward to a single biological blueprint. Meet LUCA. LUCA stands for the last universal common ancestor. Now, LUCA isn't necessarily the very first living thing ever, but it's the final bottleneck. It is the last shared ancestor before the tree of life split into the massive, diverse branches we see all around us today. By analyzing the genes of modern bacteria and archaea, scientists have been able to reverse engineer what LUCA looked like and, more importantly, how it survived. So the absolute crucial takeaway is that our prime suspect didn't rely on sunlight or oxygen at all. Instead, it thrived in a dark, literally boiling environment by feeding directly off chemical gradients. LUCA was an anaerobe, meaning oxygen was actually toxic to it. It was a thermophile, so a heat lover. And remarkably, it was autotrophic. That means it made its own food out of carbon dioxide gas using this ancient metal-heavy carbon-fixing engine known as the Wood-Lung-Dahl pathway. LUCA lived essentially like a chemical machine. And this brings us to two colliding investigative angles. Think of it like digging a tunnel from both sides of a mountain, waiting to meet in the middle. Top-down phylogenomics looks backward from modern DNA, telling us what LUCA was doing, extracting energy from gas and heat. Meanwhile, bottom-up prebiotic chemistry is looking forward from early geochemistry, trying to figure out where on the early Earth those exact chemical reactions could just happen spontaneously without any biology to help them along. We're looking for the exact intersection of rocks and life. Which brings us to Chapter 3, the scene of the spark. Our prime suspect for the birthplace of life is a specific type of hydrothermal vent hidden in the pitch-black ocean depths, the alkaline white smoker. Now, these aren't those superheated, black, volcanic smokers you might have seen on nature documentaries. No, these are created by water reacting with minerals deep in the Earth's crust, slowly forming these towering, highly porous chimneys made of iron and sulfur. They are essentially natural, towering laboratories of rock and heat. Inside these intricate mineral chimneys, toxic gases like hydrogen and carbon dioxide were constantly interacting across microscopic metal sulfide pores. Remember how we said the early ocean was acidic? Well, acidic water is packed with protons, but the fluid bubbling up from inside the vent was highly alkaline, meaning it lacked protons. So when these two vastly different waters met across the incredibly thin mineral walls of the vent, it created a really steep proton gradient. Geologically speaking, the Earth had inadvertently built a massive, natural battery. Chapter 4. Chemistry becomes biology. We have our suspect in our crime scene, but how exactly did this geological battery spark a replicating cell? Well, the transition from non-living matter to biology wasn't some magical accident. It was a physically determined chain reaction. The vent's natural electrical current practically forced stable carbon dioxide and hydrogen to react. They formed simple organics, which then got trapped inside the tiny pores of the rock. Over time, in these concentrated microscopic compartments, those simple organics built up into amino acids, lipids, and eventually RNA. The rock itself was quite literally acting as the very first cell wall. And the evidence for this is staggering. In a massive 2016 study, researchers sifted through millions of modern genes and pinned down exactly 355 of them that trace directly back to LUCA. Every single one of those 355 genes points perfectly to an organism that lived in a hot, metal-rich, deep-sea vent dependent on hydrogen and carbon dioxide. LUCA was, in a sense, only half alive. It heavily relied on the vent itself to do the heavy lifting of generating its energy. This is a total game changer. It proves that early life used the deep sea's natural proton gradients as a literal template to build its very first biological membranes. Think about this for a second. Today, every single living cell on Earth, from the bacteria in your gut to the leaves on an oak tree to the neurons firing in your brain right now, generates energy by pumping protons across a membrane. It's called chemiosmosis. Why does literally everything do it this exact way? Because life learned it from the rocks. The first cells eventually evolved their own biological membranes to trap that proton gradient, which finally allowed them to break free from the vent and colonize the open ocean. Conclusion. Closing the case. We've successfully tracked the clues all the way from a sterile, toxic Earth to a bustling deep-sea vent. It turns out life isn't a freak lightning strike. It's just the continuous and inevitable result of planetary physics releasing geological tension, which honestly begs the ultimate question. If a sterile planet can spark to life with just basic chemistry, rock, water, and deep-sea vents, where else in the cosmos is this exact same detective story unfolding right now? Moons like Europa and Enceladus have the exact same deep, salty oceans and geothermally active cores. They have the same batteries that powered LUCA. As we gaze up at the night sky, we aren't looking for miracles anymore. We're just looking for the right chemistry.